impact 50% of those communities that would otherwise hit a different threshold.
Well, those are two different things, right? Striking maintenance and then the zoning.
Is everyone okay with striking maintenance?
I am.
Okay.
I mean,
so
at some point we should know what it means.
We'll work on getting, we'll tell the NRB that's what we'd like to do, but we're clear on that.
Yeah, the only thing I'm on zoning is there is a lower threshold for towns that don't have zoning to get into Act 250, and I don't remember what that is.
We're not live yet, are we?
Yes, we are.
We are live, okay. So there is a lower threshold for towns to get under Act 250 for commercial lot sizes. So 1 or more acres of commercial property triggers Act 250. If there's no zoning in the town, it's 10 or more acres. If there is permanent zoning and subdivision bylaws, that's the acreage threshold. The topic we're currently talking about for housing units is just currently 10 units, regardless of zoning or non-zoning.
Okay, so actually what we're proposing is to make a zoning threshold
Yes,
similar to the commercial.
so it is
for
similar.
Residential versus,
Yes.
okay.
So that's why it would be simple to draft, because I would just copy the language from the above section. But currently that distinction doesn't exist for housing units.
I see.
So I'd just like to know where people are. The question I think either becomes, do we save that in our back pockets, which I have a feeling we'll have a lot of discussion around this when the bill leaves this committee. Or do we put it in now and send it out that way?
Say it again.
So either we put in now a zoning requirement to have the new threshold, which I'm saying, I think that will be a point of discussion after this leaves the committee anyway, or we put it in now. So we put it in now or we don't put it in now, and it probably
I'm fine with leaving it out. I
okay.
mean, this has got a long way to go. And to me, this is, to put all kinds of restrictions on local planning and zoning and do nothing on our end, to me is just not fair. And it's implying that it's all local that's the problem. And as my planning commission pointed to the town next door and said, they're not getting any housing there and they don't have a planning commission. So it's obviously not us. But I did point out there is enough blame to go around, pointing to things I've been involved in.
Thanks, Sam.
Somewhere I'm just still troubled by the separation between what it is we need and what we're doing to get it. And I don't have a clue right now that if we do all of these things, are we going to get anywhere near the amount of housing that we need, nor have we allowed for it, and have we in effect planned for it. If we take all of the folks involved in planning in Vermont, the regional level, the local level, and ask them, well, how many homes have you planned for in the next 10 years? You add them all up, I don't think we're going to come anywhere close to where our need is. And this is a major shortfall, I suspect. But I don't, but again, that's what I don't know.
Not a reason not to do it, I think, but there's a separate bill working to, I think Environment and Energy is taking it up on planning, and many of us have wanted everything to feed into a system that does give us this information.
I was just gonna say, Senator Brock, I think, you're right about that. I think if you were to tell towns with the restrictions that exist, including Act 250, including zoning, plan for your share of 5,000 housing units in the next 10 years. They couldn't do it because you won't get them built. I think we heard from that appraiser that came in that represents a lot of clients, and he said, I would have appraised twice as many new homes if this cap was 20 rather than 10. I mean, that was his testimony, that he could see the stop every time a project development was happening around the state, how we'd appraise it, that this is a sort of throttling factor.
If I wanted to build houses and solve a housing crisis, and I look at all the stuff that we're doing here, this isn't going to do it.
It's going to help.
It's all gonna help.
It's going to help.
I mean, it's,
Other than mandating every town to build their share of 40,000 units in the next 5
either
years.
that or make Vermont a
Right,
planned housing project entirely.
yeah. Some of us have been to countries like Germany where they just built the dang housing, and sometimes it takes a major upheaval, like a world war, to get people to do that. We don't want that. We just want to help our towns nudge a little faster and get out of the way ourselves. Senator Brock, are you ready to say how you feel about this piece? Bump it up to 25 with zoning or without zoning.
Let's just leave the zoning alone at this point, would be my inclination. Leave that for the House and Conference Committee to deal with.
So leave it as is.
But what about bumping up to the 25? Are you good with that?
Yeah.
Because I think that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with 25.
So we have 2 to keep the zoning out for now, with a lot of recognition that it's probably going to come back up in this discussion was very
So we'll come
valuable.
back.
And
But for us to do it and have the discussion that needs to do it in a day is not sufficient.
So kind of-
So, yeah, I just want to be clear what we're talking about. So we're all good with going up to 25 as the threshold, which is great. I mean, that's important. Some of us want to say 25 if there is zoning. And keep it at 10 where there's not zoning.
Yeah, the question is, where is everybody?
Right,
I'm,
Yes.
you know where I am.
We know where you are.
Where are you?
right. Yeah, this is a hard one. Because I do think there should be different thresholds. I mean, we could even get more granular and talk about like 25 or 20, but
We need
I
a
guess-
little more complexity.
yeah.
It's not
Yeah,
units.
well-
I think what
All of it.
I'm hearing from Ellen is it's subdivision lots, right?
Right, that's an entirely different page of this bill. So that is a different consideration. What we're talking about right now is housing units.
Housing units. So if no, because we've already said if we're changing from commercial to residential, you don't get Trigger Act 2.
If you're under 25 units.
You're under 25 units. So in Springfield, if I've got someone that wants to take some of those old factories, and Matt Dunn wants to do missing middle condos in those old factories, and he can do 50 units, that would trigger.
If it's a
Act 2.
priority housing project, we've also tried to lift all the caps on priority housing projects.
They just took all the caps off.
Well,
this
would
bill
would
for all
turning one of
priority
those old
projects.
factories into housing,
That's our commercial to residential section.
okay.
Or
So-
priority housing.
Or
which
Or
is mixed use.
priority housing. I'm not clear what priority housing is. It sounds like all housing is priority housing, except
We
maybe upper end that will get their housing no matter what we do. And 25 rental units is a lot of rental units in most Vermont towns. But
These are.
But it has nowhere near the impact of 25 how subdivision lots, if what we're worried about is sprawl.
That's
So
fair.
what are
That's-
we
yeah.
doing with the subdivision lots?
That's a separate
Well,
section.
we
I
could,
know.
does that matter to you for this piece, or? I think we were on
No.
asking Wendy.
Yeah, I think it gets really complicated when you think about 25 units in a town that doesn't have zoning. It is gonna trigger a lot of those state permits. And for a developer to access those permits and go through that process without zoning, so without any local component of those permits, it may not be. It may be just functionally challenging.
If they don't have an expensive Act 250 permit, and they don't have a second chance to appeal, and like, that may be true, but we're getting rid of part of the challenge why those units aren't being built.
Right, no,
And
I understand that. I'm
Well, we're
just
taking
concerned
up
about
space.
unintended consequences of places where there's no zoning, no local input.
I think what the commissioner's saying is it's not thoughtless. It has lots of other parameters that exist.
My local town without zoning has a roofing company. They've got big buildings. If that roofing company moves, and they have some big warehouse type buildings, and that could foreseeably, and this is a poorer community, it's Orange County, they could foreseeably put in 30 apartments at market rate. They would have to put in order to not trigger Act 250, they would only put in 25.
It just, remind you that color law, zoning, professional planners aren't the answer to everything. I mean, we've
Oh, I
gotten into this
know.
situation because sometimes we have decided too thoughtfully where you should live, where you shouldn't, where you should work, where a factory should be built. And we've overregulated that development and people don't have any choices. I see this as removing some of those barriers so people have more choice. Not all of it's going to be exactly what you would prefer or what I would prefer, but it's giving people an option to access housing and so on, more options to build it.
Oh, there's
And I think
definitely.
we go through time, we have
This-
created.
This
so
bill
many
is
barriers.
rich with those opportunities, Josh.
Right.
Not really.
I guess the state permits don't cover land use is my concern.
Right.
They're more of property, within a few miles of itself. So it could be isolated development. I think going to the 25 is really good. I think the 25 with zoning is an easy yes. But I don't think other people will see it that way. I think we'll still get pushback even on that.
No, it's got a long way to go. this bill.
Right.
So I would,
We should just do a 5-year moratorium on Act 250 and see what happens.
okay, that's
Put
not
out
in
a
the bill. That would-
Be a
So
lot easier.
I think this is a recent chair. I think this is a good compromise. I think we need to move on, given all the things you have to do today.
I was trying not to be the deciding factor, but if you'd like me to, I think this was a really valuable discussion so that when the time comes to compromise on this section, we have the zoning piece ready to go. But I'm gonna say we leave it as is on the third vote, to leave it as it is and take out the word maintenance.
Okay, moving on.
Okay.
What's next? Oh my gosh.
So what do
The
you
same
want to talk about
conversation.
next?
Um,
So I already mentioned
thought-
at the top of page 22, you changed.
Well, I don't want to take up too much time, but Senator Cummings, page 21 is where we take out the thresholds on priority housing projects. If you want to hear how priority housing projects.
No,
are defined. You're good. Okay,
Yeah.
Good, let's
yay, let's go to page 22.
Yep, and so I did already mention these, but small change on page 22. So it's removing the 5-year 5-mile rule for housing or mixed-use development in a designated area.
So we've already had a good discussion, so hopefully.
And we've
we
now
know-
seen them?
Yeah.
And we've now seen them, yep. So I'm fine with this.
Okay.
There,
Next thing we need to know is how much room is there.
there'll be pushback on this.
The other
also, so we may
change
want
on page
something in our back
22
pocket.
is what you discussed yesterday under the definition of subdivision, where you're removing the 5-year 5-mile rule. It is for up to 15 units located within a neighborhood development area. And yesterday it was downtown, village center, and neighborhood development area, so this is limited to neighborhood development area.
Which is the swath around the designated.
And this
It
is
does
where we've
include
got
the
the
core
3
designation
months.
within it as well.
Right.
And we can look at the map again if anyone needs to, but there aren't that many of these.
No, and we need more of them. I mean, I think my takeaway on this is we all need more designated neighborhood areas because.
That's where we're gonna make that.
Great.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Okay.
So there's only one other change. It's in the new, so moving on, starting at the bottom of page 23, I left all of the enhanced designation language highlighted in yellow.
Sorry, my brain doesn't work linearly anymore, so you had a question that I want to make sure we bookmark before David gets here at 10:15, that someone asked you if something changed.
Oh,
in the
right.
bill. So I'm just flat.
Right.
onto that,
Okay.
And we'll now go back to what you were.
Thank you.
doing.
Okay. So the language that's highlighted on page 23 through 29 is not new from yesterday's draft. I left it highlighted because I didn't actually walk through it. I wasn't sure if you wanted me to walk through it, but I did make one change in it. based on yesterday's conversation, Senator Brock raised the question about the subdivision E, which was any one person. If anyone raised a concern about the application, those concerns had to be addressed in the application. That subdivision has been removed, but the rest of the language is intact from yesterday, which allows towns to apply for an enhanced designation, which would be on top of their designated downtown. If they adopted bylaws that match the Act 250 criteria, those areas would be exempt from Act 250.
But it's only for the designated downtowns.
Only if they,
See, this is something where I'd like to expand that area,
Okay,
if
well,
let's do
y'all
it.
would consider that.
We can have the discussion and everyone can decide where they are. Do you have another, like one other designated area you want to add or all? I mean,
I would do all designated areas and the neighborhood development.
So all designated
I
areas.
mean,
is
that's the
all
only
of them.
ones that are available for that,
Is
right?
it
Other
the
than the
neigh-
whole town.
Is
Yeah, I
a
want the whole-
neighborhood a designated area?
The designated areas is all the
There's
terms.
Yeah, there are 5 designated areas. There are 3 core designated areas. Those are the downtowns, village centers, or new town centers. If you have one of those, you could add a neighborhood development area or a growth center on top of it. So there are 5 designated areas.
So,
So what's the reference where the definitions of each of those is in one place?
It's in Title 24, Chapter 76A.
Wow.
2476A.
If you want me to be
Really
more
impressive,
specific,
right.
I'm pretty sure it's 2790.
So
Comes up
24,
a lot.
Title 24, again,
Chapter 76A is the designated area chapter.
76A.
so in
Do you-
order to
No,
get this,
ask about
towns
that.
have to towns have to adopted all the criteria of Act 250 to get this.
And we are working, Scott's working
10
to get Natural
criteria.
Resources Board to just tell us to make sure we've designated the right entity to certify that they've met these criteria, et cetera, so we can.
Yeah, and we can
hopefully-
talk about the details if you want. I didn't walk you through the
Yeah.
language yesterday, but we can if you want. We still have plenty of time.
Plenty of time.
Noon is 2 hours from now.
Well, we
so-
haven't
It is,
started it.
but as you say that, we're going past noon if we're not done, so.
Right.
Okay, but
So then
I
let's
do
keep
need to
that.
leave for my
Yep,
lunch. there.
then we can,
You will continue without me.
okay.
So I'll make a lot more noise before I leave.
I'm not saying we should stop doing that, but in the last, we have to decide what we
Yeah.
want to do in the last 15 minutes with Alan. Do you want to hear more about this section or the chapter 76A?
No, I'm gonna look at 76A and make sure I understand it.
I'd like to clarify what my understanding is that this, and Anne just raised a question on the
Oh,
number.
yes.
My understanding is that all of these a town, in order to be exempt, a town must have adopted all the Act 250 criteria. Is that correct? Or
Adopted or
Anne said
addressed.
only 10.
Remember,
Yes.
there's 10 base criteria, right?
Yes,
Right.
and the sub-criteria within them are included. So if you want to look at page 24, line 10. To obtain enhanced designation, a municipality must demonstrate that it has each of the following: an approved downtown development district, or whichever category you define. Municipal bylaws that are identical or are determined to be consistent with model bylaws written by the NRB pursuant to the later section.
Got it.
Municipal bylaws that do not include broad exemptions, including significant private or public land from requiring a municipal permit, adequate municipal staff. And so there's a later section that does direct the NRB to adopt model bylaws that a town could adopt that address all of the criteria of Act 250. And so the town could either look at their existing bylaws that they have, match up what matches the criteria, or adopt some or all of the model bylaws that would incorporate the Act 250 criteria.
Can I just go back, as I read the last paragraph on page 23 going to 24, which says that if this enhanced designation is terminated, the development or subdivision within the designated center must receive a permit if applicable. Well, if the development's been built, I mean, you have to tear down if it doesn't meet the requirements of the permit.
No. It would be triggered when any change happened to that development, and this is an existing provision that applies to other provisions like the priority housing project designation. So that demolition, I don't think is something that has occurred very often, if ever, when there's a violation. Normally, a penalty is assessed and the requirement of the permit is legally mandated. But that is usually triggered either by the material change or the substantial change. So this type of process exists similarly somewhere else in Act 250 already, but you can change this if you'd like, since this is a new program.
I'm just thinking of the implications of it, and what circumstances might this enhanced designation be terminated?
Karen,
Yeah, I'm just gonna say that the corollary is kind of in zoning, that if you get a zoning permit under the bylaws that were in effect at the time you got that permit, then you're in compliance,
Yeah.
even when they change the.
That's what I would assume, but that's
Yeah.
not what this says.
No, it is not.
I do know a deck that was required to have a corner taken off because they didn't get a permit. And it was 3 inches over the setback.
And this
Well,
just
so
strikes me as a
it's gonna
potential
happen.
for unintended consequences.
Yeah.
Commissioner,
I would just note that it says identical in here. I don't know, that's a little strict, identical to Act 250, it might be, maybe come up with another phrase.
Or determined to be consistent with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's okay.
You could say,
It's-
you could take out identical in that sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, just think of
There's
that.
identical.
On line 14, page 24.
And just the
Oh,
other
I see.
comments that we've heard on this is, don't oppose it, think it's fine, it's another option. I don't know that many communities will likely take this option up.
It's
but
one
there.
option we're presenting. I think that in an array of options,
It's
this is a good
essentially
option.
saying our whole town is going to, we're gonna follow Act 250 as our,
But
you know,
that's okay, and then they don't have to go through Act 250, which is, if you adopt those values and that that is consistent, that makes sense. I think this is an array of options. This bill is full of options, and this is one option.
so we have a big question on the table from Senator Harrison, which is to add more than designated downtowns, to add all designation areas.
Right.
That's fine.
That's a lot. but
Well,
it
I mean, we
makes
want
sense.
housing
Yeah.
and those areas have already been shown to be the ones that are the most
So without
appropriate
weighing
for
in, I
building.
see 3 yeses.
I mean, if we can't provide housing for the workers we have, not for any huge growth, if we don't have housing for them, we're gonna become a theme park where rich people can live here and everybody else can come visit.
Mhm.
You need to provide for the basic human needs of people, and one of them is housing.
You
And
need to
because
have
we
it
don't,
easy to do it.
yes,
It
we
wants to
don't
be
have
easy and
housing,
fast to
so
do
we're
it.
having trouble with healthcare because we can't get nurses to move.
I know Senator Clarkson, we don't have time to go round and around, but
I would suggest we move. I'm fine with
you're
this
fine with
section
it,
as it
okay.
is.
And it
Well,
should
that
stay
is
as
what
is.
I was, so you are stating your case.
I'm fine with all designated areas.
Okay.
I think this is good.
Okay,
good
great.
shape.
So we want at all designated areas.
I mean, there may be consequences.
Okay, that's probably,
Yeah,
if,
parents
Ellen,
with
it's probably good if you're
teenagers.
here for NRB because they might have small technical issues that they want to raise. That's my hope, technical issues. Is it Sabina, anything else?
Or Peter.
Well, Maya said we're on the way, so I'm assuming.
Oh, on the way physically? Oh, I'm like staring at the
Oh.
screen like something's about to happen. Okay, so they're on the way. So when, Senator Harrison, this is probably a good time to go back to your question.
To the other question,
The one that was
About
raised
the
by a
voters.
constituent. Yeah.
right, and honestly, I
think it's-
still don't know, that may have been in a previous version.
Well,
of the
maybe
bill.
on the record, we could just get Ellen's opinion on what they might be looking at.
Right, the question, and this is third hand, that was posed to me, was that we were eliminating the ability or the requirement that bylaw changes be adopted by the voters and permitting the select board to make those changes. And which I don't see that language. I thought it might relate to, I was hoping to find a way to streamline bylaw updates when the update includes something that is a state mandate. So the town there's no purpose to voting. You can't vote no, essentially. So that may have been the source of the question, but I don't think we ever put language in for that.
No, you haven't changed the section on bylaw adoption at all. So
Right.
so adoption by Australian ballot is still.
And I would say if we did anything there, it might have to go to GovOps.
That's what
So
I was just.
we like,
Okay,
so we probably don't want to even speak it aloud,
Okay.
so hopefully that satisfies whoever you talk to that we're not changing any voting.
I was just looking for streamlining and
Yeah,
cost savings.
yeah.
You have a member of GovOps here.
Okay, so you guys can put it on your list.
We have so much on the list.
There's a
Well,
technical
maybe I
GovOps
tried doing
bill.
something like that with updating the insurance statutes.
Yeah,
There's a national thing and you either do it or you don't, you're not there.
you can flag that with Senator Clarkson for
We
possible
are-
technical GovOps.
Okay,
Exactly. We're gonna have a GovOps, technical corrections.
great.
That might be more than a technical.
That's not, yeah, this is maybe a little more than.
It's a little
technical
more than a
correction.
technical correction, but all sorts of stuff is in.
I had one outstanding question
Okay.
about, something raised by the South Burlington planner, that if there's an existing home on septic
Mhm,
in an area served by municipal water and sewer,
mhm.
would any of the exemptions we listed prevent them from moving from septic to connecting to the water and sewer?
So,
Let's say they have a
Not that-
farmhouse and
not-
there's no new housing designated there, but they said, we're gonna take this old farmhouse and we're gonna connect it to water and sewer. Would that be a problem with the exemptions that we created
the exemptions that you created,
for
so,
when you have to allow density for?
okay,
municipal water and
so
sewer?
your intent in this bill, I don't think was to address municipal authority over connections.
Mhm.
My only thought is that in page 5 to page 6, you do ask the town to identify if there are areas where no connections or expansions are permitted.
Mhm.
And so that's for them to identify. I don't know
But
if
they could make an exception on their own.
right, it's not requiring them to do that or
Okay.
affirmatively changing their authority to do that in any area. This is asking them if they have these areas to identify these areas that have constraints. I would say that I don't know if that would change a municipality's practice in any way, but
Right.
you're not changing a municipality's authority to do so. The authority is still with the municipality on whether or not to issue connection permits.
We do say, but no connections or expansions are permitted, and I wonder if it would be prudent to say, no connections or expansions are permitted, comma, except for where there's existing dwellings or something.
With the lead-in language, that is the municipality identifying these areas. So this isn't about authority to actually do that.
Okay,
It's
so
about
they
when
can
they're
they can make their own
mapping out
exception.
these areas.
They've just got a similar A and R,
Okay.
their wastewater, village wastewater program
Yeah.
right now, had to have a similar conversation, because the intent of that was to help bring wastewater to villages that had none.
Yeah,
Right.
Often, it's not gonna be an underground pipe system like we think, it's gonna be an alternative system where outside of the village, they're requiring 10 acres, and they're putting in a, leach field that serves the village. And their rules didn't allow anyone outside of that village to hook up, even if the line went by their house.
okay.
But that was an internal rule that they realized they should revise, because if someone lives on that extension line,
Okay,
it's
You
more
wanna hook up,
environmentally, it's more efficient to let them hook up. But a lot of these rules about being able to hook up actually live with the funding source that
Okay.
pays for it, such as A&R, which has smart growth principles, which typically doesn't let people hook up outside the service area that they're,
That they're
trying to
designed to
help.
service.
So there's a lot of control there too, to not just have sprawl as a result of a wastewater or water infrastructure project.
I think we're fine with that
Okay.
anyway. So it's just, it's internal discretion and we don't need to.
Well,
address
I'm
it.
trying to figure out what they're really asking.
Mhm.
I mean, in Montpelier, the water lines go by more than a few houses, water and sewer, who have functioning septic systems and functioning wells, and they don't choose to pay the city water bill.
Mhm.
They pay a readiness fee, and the city pumps their septic tank once a year for free. If one of those, and you said a farm, so I assume there's some acreage. If that farmhouse hooks up to water and sewer, are they then required to do the quadruplex 5 units an acre? That is what I wanted to know. That to me-
That might be the crux of the
Yeah.
question.
So in this section, you're asking the towns to define those areas for themselves.
Okay.
So if it's included in the area that the town has defined, then 4 units can't be prohibited.
We're down to 4.
that the town has defined as what?
So the criteria are on page 5 and 6, including whether or not there are constraints on the system. So there are a number of criteria.
Okay,
in
so
here.
if they don't have enough capacity or water pressure,
Yeah.
they can say, no, you can only do an acre or something. But if I owned the farmhouse and I was going to live in the farmhouse, but I might want to subdivide a couple lots. If I hooked up to city water and sewer, which would be necessary to develop those lots, I would then have to allow, or the town would, 5 units per acre, which as the owner of the farmhouse might deter me from doing that because I've been living on my farm and I don't want to see quadruplex.
So there's a couple of complicated things in there that are not
Nice.
specifically addressed in this bill. But yes, if it's in the area that has been mapped for water sewer, the town can't prohibit more than 4. We've lowered it to
We've
4
lowered it to 4, okay,
per acre.
yeah.
That doesn't mean that the farmer or whoever is selling it needs to construct 4.
Or that if they could connect to water and sewer, they need to all of a sudden construct
Correct.
4. They could say, I just want to finally move from septic to water and sewer
Now,
without
after
needing to
this-
build new housing.
But after the sale, the farmer or the seller, whoever this is, may not have control of how many units are built.
Right,
But
you can't write a
deed
covenant that
restrictions
says
are-
he can't.
no, the deed restrictions, the changes you're making now, that
Could be.
potentially could be in the deed restriction.
Okay,
Okay.
so people that want 3-acre zoning and a McMansion can still find a way to do it.
There potentially are
Less
ways.
ways, but some.
They have better lawyers than I.
So we need to get the Natural Resources Board in the witness chair quickly. Ellen, do you feel like there's anything burning that you didn't get to? I thought we got through it and I think you did an amazing
We
job.
got through the
Thank you.
changes, so.
Thank
I
you.
speak for-
I,
don't have anywhere else to be though.
oh, do you want to hang
Great.
out? I mean, I think it would be good if you heard that.
I do wanna hang out.
That'd be great.
Say that.
There's a chair there waiting for you or Dan.
Or do,
You
oh,
could at
do
least
both
get her
of you want to?
Yes.
Okay. So as you come forward to the witness chair, introduce yourselves. I will say, I was anticipating that if there were any major flags, we would have seen them last night. You've been following along with the commissioner. And we have some technical questions and we want to make sure you don't have any technical concerns, that there's no places where you see we've appointed the wrong commission or board to make a determination, that kind of thing. Does that make sense with what you are prepared to discuss? Okay, great. Do you want to come to the chair? Okay.
And I was about to say, I hope so. I know people answer those questions.
Okay, great.
Yes.
We'll get back to you.
Randy, you're gonna ask your
Yeah.
maintenance questions, right? Before we take
Before
out maintenance, you're gonna ask for maintenance.
Well, we're going through the whole Act 250 section with them, and then we can get to all of our other list.
Okay, well, that's right at the beginning, isn't it?
It is. So,
Hi, Peter and Sabina.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Morning, Pete Gill, Executive Director for the Natural Resources Board.
Sabina Haskell, Chair of the Natural Resources Board.
great. So I thought we'd go as quickly through all of the Act 250 sections as we can.
Yeah.
The first one is increasing the threshold for any construction within the 5x5. We have a plan to take that up, and we wanted to strike the words "or maintenance" because it felt like maintenance. We looked at definitions in the chapter on maintenance and construction of housing and couldn't see a reason that maintenance should trigger Act 250. We want maintenance. So it's a policy choice, but if you had a real concern about the technical aspect of removing maintenance, we want to hear that.
So maintenance is like if you want to upgrade your windows or your heating.
Well, it's looks like it's specifically related to mobile homes and mobile home
Gotcha,
parks.
gotcha.
And so you might add more concrete slabs, but
Yeah.
I don't, maintenance, that's that's construction as far as I'm concerned. So maintenance might be repairing some of those things.
Yeah.
And we didn't want that to be a trigger any longer.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I've never honed in on that word, because in general, we're looking at new construction, right?
Right.
In the statute. So that is, yeah, and that's existing.
Yeah,
in
we
the
were wondering
statute
what maintenance meant
currently.
in this context.
And why that would be a problem.
Yeah,
Does maintenance, does it mean redoing a road, paving a road that was a dirt road, or redoing a whole septic system?
yeah.
Or does it mean
I'll be
furnaces
honest,
and
I don't know of an instance where that, and I don't have all the years of case law in my head for sure on Act 250, but I can't think of a time where we've taken original jurisdiction based on maintenance of mobile
Okay,
homes.
so there's not an unforeseen circumstance that you can think of from the past right now that would make that a problem.
If we took it in.
We can certainly get back to you,
Yeah.
but I am
We're
not
voting
aware.
on
I am
the
not
bill.
aware. So
Yeah,
and I understand the
You
urgency,
can
yes.
tell natural resources.
Yeah.
We have removed, the next section removes the thresholds on priority housing projects in any designated area. We need to go as fast as we can.
Yeah.
Do they have a comment on
No, they just shook their heads no. So then we get to a 25 unit threshold in any designated area, and our lawyers of various stakeholder groups put their heads together and thought that within any continuous period of 3 months would help capture someone who's doing simultaneous projects and not hitting the threshold.
That increases the number that they're allowed to.
It increases the
Yes.
number they're allowed to do without trying to make it so that they can have lots of projects going at once.
Understand.
Just
Yep.
Yeah.
that the cap gets lifted altogether, but
Yeah.
that they have a simultaneousness. We then we take subdivisions up to 15 or more within a designated neighborhood development area. I think that, and then we get to, so then we allow commercial to residential to be exempt if they're going from commercial to residential and creating less than 25 housing units.
We were at a meeting on Friday in
Mhm.
Rutland, and the town manager Proctor brought this up, so.
Okay.
Yeah, just
We're channeling
FYI.
people, yeah. And then the big one is, and I think you were not here for the discussion, it's taking the big new chunk of language on enhanced designation
Right.
and having it apply to all designated areas was the discussion we just had and agreed to. And that's obviously a large section, and we want to make sure that we are tasking the right entities with the certification especially, but if you see any other technical issues, this is language that has come up in the legislature before, as you may know, so
Yeah,
maybe familiar to you.
I can promise you that I have not done a deep dive on this, and
Yes.
Pete's probably done a little bit deeper dive. But this is something that I know that you all have weighed in on VLCT, and something that Mayor Weinberger wants in Burlington.
He said downtowns, we just made the decision 15 minutes ago to do all designated
Okay.
areas, just so we're clear on the record.
Yeah.
There may be, this is very, very minor thing, there may be a update to the current draft, but there was something that was requiring us to do the bylaws in January of this last year.
Mhm.
So we would need, we would need next year, I think is what you meant, in there. Yeah, probably a typo.
Okay, and the typo's gone. The typo's gone.
Okay,
We had,
great, yeah.
Ellen
The
was very clear
the
about getting
versions are
drafted.
going quick.
Yes, exactly.
So now it's
I'm
January
glad you
25.
No, this is 2024.
It should say 2024, I think is what you meant.
But to be clear, the NRB would publish model bylaws. The board would determine compliance with the enhanced designation requirements.
Right.
That's all squares. Technically, that's who would do the work.
Yeah, I understand that's the intent.
Or, well, we want the right entity to do the work, so.
The board, again, just digesting this, so you've got Natural Resources Board, the other board that's referenced in here, is that the downtown
Downtown.
board?
Or, yes, it is. It's on
Yeah.
page 26.
It's just the NRB. The downtown board is a different board
Okay,
that could be another option, but this is just having the NRB do it.
Okay, and since this section is in Title 24, I would just want to make sure that it was clear which board you're talking about in any instance, and that probably
That's a
clear to
lawyer
everyone.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably clear to everyone, but just wanted to point that out, so thank you.
Okay, Ellen is taking that on board. It doesn't sound like it changes our intent, and Ellen will figure out the flag, take that flag. Okay.
Do you want comments or do you want,
Yeah.
okay, in terms of, and I'll try to direct us here to this section,
Here.
I'm on the first page of the enhanced designation.
Okay.
And let's see here. Subsection B, 1B. It says municipal bylaws that are identical or determined to be consistent with model bylaws. I just flagged that or determined to be consistent could be sort of squishy in terms of how it might be applied.
Sorry, I'm smiling because we just had this conversation about identical could be hard to achieve, so I think we want both. I think we want both in,
Yep.
and it's still.
And
up to you.
policy decision, just wanted to flag it.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's fair.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, I'm just,
By the way, thank you for just coming and doing this. We appreciate it.
you're
I
welcome.
know if there's something you feel like you missed, we'll be willing, we're able to have that conversation with you and Natural Resources in the next.
In another-
meeting.
in a future, yeah. gotcha.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I can reserve any other. kind
No,
of
if there- but if
broad
there,
brush, I think I'm not seeing anything that jumps out in terms of, as you were saying, designating who's doing what kind of thing. That seemed clear to set my previous comment.
Mhm.
You may have talked about this as well. It talks about adequate municipal staff. Again, that's something that's fairly squishy and difficult. It might be helpful to have a numerative to that, per 100,000 capita or whatever it might be, but some way to make that clear number wise.
That might be something we can continue to work on. If you think, if there's, we would take suggestions on what adequate means, but I think in our limited time, we wouldn't be able to
Well,
define that.
The
well
towns
now.
would have to weigh in on that, what they
Yeah.
consider adequate municipal
If
staff.
they've gone this far,
Right.
there should be an assumption that they have, because they have to have gotten a downtown or village center designation, and now we're gonna get an enhanced designation. I think at some point, I feel like a parent with teenagers who are getting their driving license. At some point, you have to swallow your fear and let them go.
Yeah.
And
I appreciate that.
we've let them go on
Yeah.
this
Yeah, we're
far.
letting them go. This is a
Yeah, no, I think that's
The
enough.
towns have grown up. And at
Yes.
some point, we need
Yeah.
to let it go.
Yes,
And let them.
we'll save that
take the
analogy,
hand and administer
Senator
law.
Harris.
Yeah.
Just my understanding, if you want to use that analogy, the NRB is doing the driver training and the NRB is deciding
Whether you
who
get your
knows
license.
or
Yeah.
who's able to
Yeah.
drive.
Yeah.
So all of these criteria, right, on this first page, those are decided by the NRB.
But the 10
So-
criteria is.
Yeah,
Well, no, they really are decided because the NRB, as I read it, is deciding which towns are capable of doing this. So you may want to establish criteria at some point to help the towns
Right.
get to that
The
level.
more
But I don't think the
rules-
legislation
rulemaking.
needs to have that.
right, right.
So unless anyone has anything else burning, we didn't want to just, I'm sorry, this was quick.
Oh, yeah.
But, we have to vote the bill out by noon. So we really appreciate you coming
We
in
made
for notice and
We could have had you here for an hour. and
I
spent all
know,
the time
hopefully
going
this
through it.
is-
Much faster this way,
Right,
frankly.
appreciate that.
One,
yeah,
leg on your first comment in terms of who,
Where are you, Pete?
and yeah, let me figure out where I am so I can help you get there too. Sorry, I'm working off of 8.1, but it's,
oh, okay. It's similar.
Subsections little c. So I think it's on the second, it'd be on the second or third.
The process for
page.
issue.
Process for
It's
issue.
It's on page
Yes,
20.
right there, yeah. And then little one is, it talks about the department. I didn't know if that was board for the pre-application meeting or that was,
No, it's the department.
that's the department, that's
Yeah, the-
ACCD or,
no, it's the Department of Housing and Community Development.
Oh, okay,
They
yeah,
currently
that's
handle
right.
they handle the pre-application meetings currently for the other designations.
Yeah.
yeah, I recall that. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Question is, do they have adequate staff?
It's similar to work they're doing already.
Thank you.
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you. We're tracking down our elections. Now
We
Move
hope many
forward.
towns will.
Oh, Ellen, yeah.
I just want to, this discussion just reminded me, I forgot to update the effective date section.
Oh, okay.
So I am gonna go make
Thank
the
you for flagging
change
that.
that you
Yes.
requested, but I'm also gonna update the effective date section because as
Where was the-
Ms.
Yes.
Hill just
Where was your
mentioned,
January
the bylaws are due until January
Couldn't find it.
2024.
Okay.
So it's going to-
Okay, great. Okay, so the maintenance.
I think it's
we got
fixed.
that.
I think you're on 9.1. I was looking on 8.1. this
I know,
morning.
but doesn't matter. So what section? was
This is what the bylaws.
Is that
What's
it?
the date?
It's, yeah,
Yeah.
and it's been changed, yeah. So
Yeah,
section
Alice-
20,
yeah,
section
Yeah,
here.
it's on page 29.
Oh, it's on page 29. Thanks. That's what I need.
And we'll do a flow chart of this.
I just could not
Somebody
find
will.
it.
Who is we?
Somebody will do a flow chart.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
There's some.
Josh will do it.
So,
We really need to.
so January
Who's not?
24 is
That's
okay.
good.
There's something he said, he wrote that.
Oh, okay. I thought we just.
He said he didn't think you needed them right now, and that's why I wrote upstairs.
So Pete, it was in 8.1 that we had the wrong date. Yes,
Yeah, it's
okay,
been-
yeah, it's been.
Yeah, section 20.
Is that it? Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome so much.
We really appreciate you being here and taking a big change on board. Thanks.
Okay.
Nothing's easy.
Yes, oh my gosh. Yeah, you
I'm
can-
gonna come back.
Okay, you can still hang out.
But but if you're talking to David for a few minutes.
Yeah.
So
For
Pete,
coming, so good night, Barry.
Yes. Oh, you met it? No, I saw pictures.
Did you see pictures?
Um,
Cute, isn't it?
while
Yeah.
we're waiting for
Oh,
David,
she's got a
let's
pen.
talk about the criminal penalty for fair housing.
yes, because Damien needs an answer.
So I think each of our discussions need to be like 5 minutes, so we keep going. So 5-minute discussion on the criminal penalty for fair housing going
Okay,
up
so-
from 1 to 10,000. It's on page 34. If people can refresh our memories, what we heard, I mean, essentially what we heard is the $1,000 was put in 1987. It has not been updated. We are updating the civil penalty. And it's not often that anyone's seen the criminal penalty used. It would have to be quite an egregious case. Maybe somebody lost more than financial remuneration because of this. I don't want to guess too much, but this would be a cap, not how much money the person has to pay. So the
Will
question is,
this get it sent to judiciary?
No.
Think?
Well, I would assume that this would be prosecuted by a state's attorney or the AG's office, not by anybody we might get.
Yeah,
AG's office.
right.
And so that, in my mind, should go to judiciary.
It's, and Bohr says it's been seldom used. On the other hand, it would have to be so egregious that I think actually this is a pretty modest penalty.
I think what would happen, what I would request is that while it's in appropriations or somewhere else, judiciary just
take a
can
look
look at
at
the issue.
But-
So I don't think that
I
should be
mean,
your discussion
$1,000
here.
is decimal dust
Right,
considering where rents are
Right.
now.
yes, Senator Clarkson.
Given Bohr's comments and Damien's, I'm fine with this. It would have to rise to a level that's so egregious that I think maybe 10,000 is a little honest, but I am happy with it as it is, and they may be interested in taking it up in judiciary. But
Okay,
I'm fine with this.
any major objections? Okay, and help me remember that we'll just flag it for judiciary and say, could you look at this while it's in the other committee? I think what we can do is look at the amounts and other things, and if we hit a ledge council question, we'll reserve it and come back for David, but I think we're capable of going through some of these appropriation amounts and deciding, where we are. So, until he gets here. So the next big question in my mind, yay, hi David. We just started looking at the eviction rescue fund on page 35. And so while David's in the chair, if people have questions about what he wrote, that's one thing. And then we can have a brief, all of these need to be like short discussions about the amount of money. Yeah.
Okay. My question with that, other than, how do we know what the right number is?
Mhm.
Right now, it's my understanding that for years, community action agencies, at least Capstone, have been doing programs to help people avoid eviction, things like, yes, you really do have to pay your rent.
Yes.
And, just some basic financial
Yes.
management. I don't want to set up a separate,
This was with VLA and the capstones to say this kicks it, this is money that kicks it to
okay,
their
so
process.
this money would
Now
go
we do
to
budgeting,
them.
now we do more,
Okay.
yeah. And there'll probably be more language in the House that creates more of a container around that, but I believe, I don't want to be wrong, but I think VSHA said we think 5 million and we have 2.5 million in here. So it's less than what they wanted. And I believe this is an area where JFO, it doesn't say here, but I thought they might be flagging this as very relevant to ARPA funding, because it's a sort of acute impact of the.
It's sort of in a very constructive way, continuing some of the VRAP work.
Yeah.
And I support this 100%, because if we can cure an eviction challenge and we heard some great examples of domestic violence, that damage or kid damage or stuff that threatens a person to be able to stay in their apartment. If that can be cured with a relatively small amount of money, this is a good idea. And I'm sorry we've limited it. On the other hand,
Yeah, as long as there is some
wrap around.
social service
Yeah.
attached to that. Because say,
That-
my kid broke a window
Mhm.
once. If my kid regularly breaks windows
Mhm,
or tears off the wallpaper, or my cat regularly
mhm.
removes it, just to pay my rent, so the landlord just has to sustain more damage before,
Right,
you know, there needs to be,
that's the intent,
Yes.
and there's whatever flesh needs to come on is, if they need more language, that'll, I think, get there too. Appropriations may require that, but yeah, that's absolutely the intent. Okay,
And our decision to do 2.5 instead of 5 was what? Statewide, 'cause this is
Yeah.
statewide,
yeah,
So last year, 5 million was appropriated.
right?
and
for
that's
this,
why,
and it just started. They haven't put any money out the door, so
well, VSHA was in the chair saying they feel this is different. That
Yeah.
they sent 5 million out the door that would go to landlords with different parameters around someone coming in, damage when someone's there, damage before they get there, non-payment of rent. This is starting a mediated process with solely non-payment of rent that legal aid and others would be involved in, that Vermont State Housing Authority supported and
Yeah.
said they didn't need money for the program, the rental risk mitigation that has 5 million in it.
you know, it's
For the
it's an
landlords,
expand-
but
I would
they
say
need
it's
it
an
for the-
expansion of that program.
Right,
Yes,
Sort
with a
of
very
like the other
specific,
side.
exactly,
But, yeah,
exactly.
so I would,
so you think 2.5 is?
Well,
is
I
enough?
think the wish list is getting big,
Big, yeah.
so we're, you know,
So, and they did say that
That's
it takes
where
an
I'm-
average, and they said it takes an average of about $2,000 to cure an eviction, which, so let's keep it in at 2.5.
great.
Let's go.
2.5.
Yeah.
And that's what's reflected in our spreadsheet. I don't mean to take David's job from him, but on the next page, we're, you know, we said statewide, kind of with the home sharing money, we know of 2 programs.
Throughout this.
Mobile home parks, you know, we have the commissioner here, I think he's heard me say this, but my intent, we've gotten, it looks like maybe $16 million appropriated for mobile home park and mobile home repair and infrastructure support, et cetera. There's the 12 million for parks, and there's the 4 million that just came online, even though it was approved last year for repairs, et cetera.
yes, correct. Actually, there's about 24 million in A&R for
Okay.
infrastructure, water and
Okay.
sewer. They've just awarded the first 14. They have another round. But
Great.
that's everything from just designing, because they don't even know what the problems are,
Yeah.
to helping permit, to helping fix the problems. There's VHB has mobile home park money, and then we just have launched the $4 million, which is small repair grants, you know, for individual homes, small infrastructure grants for the park owners. Infrastructure in the sense of removing abandoned homes, repairing sites to add homes, and then some foundation money.
Mhm.
You know, I've talked to Paul Dragon, you know, Executive Director of CBOEO. We have a meeting later today. You know, I think the hope with this is, and I'm not really advocating either way because this wasn't in the governor's budget.
Yeah.
And we have the money right now, but this wouldn't be the intent to create a new program. Since
No.
we have,
Yeah.
the CBOEO has its ongoing mobile home
Right.
program, which we
Mhm.
grant them an $80,000 capacity grant each year in our base budget. Part of this $4 million repair program also granted them another 100,000 for technical assistance.
Yeah,
And so this would kind of be adding on to that to continue
right.
the efforts in the program we have is what I know Paul was interested in, sort of verifying that we weren't being asked to create yet a third
No.
program of some
This is
sort.
me as a member of the
Yeah.
committee feeling strongly that we don't do pockets when we
And then it
have it,
stops.
and then we
Right.
keep a consistent eye on the needs of our mobile home.
Yeah, and I think we actually all feel that
Yeah,
very
well, I just
strongly,
wanted to
having
say, like,
done
it's
that.
one
that's,
of
I
the
said
areas-
$500,000.
Yes, it's, you know,
Yeah.
mobile home parks, we have a lot of data. We collect an annual report. We know every lot, we know the vacancy, we know the condition.
Right,
We actually know where we can fix things.
yeah, and it would be
That's more
nice to
than
have
we
some
have on
consistent.
So
We have to move very quickly, so.
And we've added opportunities to look at new parks too, because I think one of our concerns is we don't
Yeah.
have more.
And this is base funding.
This is based, that's exactly right, this is my intent for base funding.
Okay.
Okay, so we're now on to first gen home buyer. It still has $1 million in it, but we've added the language that Maura put forward as a best practice as states look at how to not make it too constrained, but make sure you're getting to the right population. Okay. Middle income home ownership, somewhat of a large discussion because the governor's budget does not have the home ownership appropriation continuing. This is a question as to whether we feel that home ownership, thank you, Pat, for being here. We haven't made any financial changes to these sections, but we're starting to get into a question of what the governor proposed, what are we proposing? If we could pass that out as reference as we go. I don't want us to get like lost in.
We have it. Oh, is
Oh,
it
there-
updated? We have missing middle at 20 million.
Okay, sorry. This compares it to the governor's budget, so
That's all.
I don't think these are changes. Shouldn't be changes to the amount we have in the bill, but,
And the
just being able
BAA,
to compare.
Yeah.
and the BAA has put money into this going forward, right? I mean, we have 9 million from the BAA
It's one of these.
for missing middle, so,
That's a yes from them.
right.
Is this just to be passed around to look at, or is this one for each? of us?
I think Scott's putting together one for each of us, so.
If I could just.
Thank you.
Answer some-
Maura, yeah.
I got interrupted by printing something else.
Okay.
To answer Senator Clarkson, yes, by the BAA 9 million, you would have theoretically provided enough money for DHFA to, if they all look good to us. I don't want anyone to think it's a given, but we have enough money to fund the applications we got because that window was open for 8 weeks and that's how much in applications we got. This 20 million would allow us to reopen the application window for
Right.
about another 8 weeks, I think, and that would
Fill it again,
that is what the developers are telling me, but I don't know if to like do it.
right.
Okay.
So that's,
And
a-
even if it's 16 weeks or something, that's still, there's a lot of projects that could be developed for homeownership. And there was money to address the backlog in BAA, but we're comparing to FY '24 where there is no money for this program.
and just to clarify, because Maura had put a number on the 20 million, it's an expensive program. It's only, how many homes? 16 homes, do I remember?
Oh
No,
my God.
I have 112.
112. Okay.
It's like if you
That's
did-
better. That's.
$20 million
I remember.
On average, the applications we have now, we're asking for $170,000 per home.
Right.
And remember, those are, much of that is permanent investments. Those homes upon resale, the future sales prices will be reduced
Right.
by how much we put into it. And I think if you compare that broadly to the types of housing investments we do in the state, I would not characterize that as overly expensive.
Right.
Because remember, a third of them have to be shared equity, and in those situations, we actually have to put a lot more. That brings that average up. If I were to give you the average between shared equity and non-shared equity, it would be two very different models, and that 170 blends them together.
So
Right.
this is it's an internationally award-winning model to sort of keep home ownership affordable for people. Senator Harris.
And are we making a distinction between base funding and one-time funding when we're talking about that?
It's general fund.
That's a great question. We don't have a distinction in here. It would come back to, everything comes back to us as a question of how much we want to appropriate. My intent is not to say we can do 20 million going forward. It's to say in the housing crisis, this feels like another good investment for our.
I agree. But we're not making that decision now. That's a
Folks
later.
will probably make the decision about where they pull it from.
Okay.
We made some wording changes to sort of get to geographic distribution, things like that. And we have the 20 million in there. I don't see any objections right now to making this a conversation with appropriations that we have. And then we get to rental housing revolving loan. Between Maura and others, I had asked for a change that my intent was to make sure that the people at 65 to 80%, their rental access is subsidized enough to really make it worthwhile. And the developers felt like taking the 121 to 150 that we added and bringing it down to 75 actually made it unworkable. So my proposal was instead to give a little bit, to make the gap wider so that there is $150,000 benefit to those who help 65 to 80 AMI, and then $100,000 benefit from 81 to 150.
So it ramps it down.
The inevitable question is going to be the risk that we're over subsidizing anything. I want to remind you that it's the lesser of 35% of the total development cost, so there's no way to get rich off this. We also have developer fee limits, and that's why you have VHA underwriting all this, is we never give a dollar more than the pro forma shows is necessary, and we're looking at bids and third-party agreements and all sorts of stuff. So these are caps that you put in to make
Lots
sure
of
that.
guardrails.
Yeah.
Lots of guardrails.
And I wanted a little bit of a clarification on page 45 that we have the subsidized unit is the longer of 7 years for full repayment of the loan plus 3 years, and the 3% rent increase continues with the plus 3 years as well. So we're not saying, okay, your time's up and now it's a huge jump. You have 3 years of notice stepping away.
Right, important.
The rest is that aligning language. There's a report. Yeah.
Just a landlord, I know, says that if he raises his rent 2% a year for 5 years, nobody complains, nobody notices. If he doesn't raise it for 5 years and then jumps at 10%, everybody has a fit. That it is easier, and I'm thinking in this 3 years, rather than you've got warning, it's going up. If you allow them to ramp it up so that first you got $100 increase, the second year you got 100, or I mean, depending on where it's going. If you've been held to 3% a year, which is probably well below the cost, that landlord is going to have a pretty steep jump at the end.
I mean, I think the question is whether or not they want this money to do, you know, if we
Yeah,
saw
I'm
them
just
say
saying for
this doesn't
everybody,
pencil out
for
us.
the tenants,
Right.
to allow the landlord to start ramping up over 3 years, it would make it, you know,
I thought it
it's
was.
easy to say, I mean, what do we mean plan for it? It's going to go up $1,000. Well, it's easy for me to say, well, I got, you know, another 2 years to worry about that. If it's going up $250 the first year and $250, then there is a ramping up.
So the landlord could make a decision because they get 3% every year. So during that 7 year, like during the whole repayment period, they can choose to do 3% every year. That adds up quite nicely against
Your
inflation.
property taxes are going up more than 3% a year.
Well,
We don't know what inflation is going to be.
so, but at the
think
moment,
my water
it lets
bill
the
goes up.
property owner, so it lets the landlord either do it
I'm
every
not
year
using
or
it.
do it at the end.
It lets them do 3% every year without any big jumps. They could do it
Right.
from the start to the
Yeah,
finish.
what I'm saying is that your base cost
Mhm.
of, if this is not going to be subsidized by the state, your base cost, your property taxes are going up more than 3%. If you're on city water and sewer, which I'm assuming you are, that's probably going up more than 3%. That's just over time. I'm not using any more water, but my water bill keeps going up. If those costs have been going up over time, and you give assume we want the tenants not to be evicted, but to be able to stay there. If you just say, okay, in 3 years, this project's been sold, your rent's going up $2,000 a month.
That couldn't happen. You mean at the end of 3 years?
Yeah, at the end of
Oh,
3
okay.
years, it would be easier for the tenants if you allowed the landlord to ramp that up
Per year.
per year, so that, because
Right,
if money.
You don't want them to fall off a cliff.
I don't
Right,
want them to
exactly.
fall off a cliff.
so we
Or,
could build that in, we could say it needs to be assessed annually. I mean, you don't need to wait till the end.
So,
Right. Isn't that what you're saying?
to ground it in data, because I know there's fears about,
Yeah.
price increases. For the last 10 years, both statewide and in Chittenden County, rents overall have gone up 3% a year. Over the last 20 years, they've been going up 4% a year. So I don't think that this 3% increase is that far off.
And that's
from
a
what
market
the
rate.
is.
Yeah,
That's market wide,
exactly.
not affordable or anything like that.
Okay.
So I think that the 3% is, we can assume that landlords, if they adjust it by that 3%, they should be able to keep up generally with costs. The other thing I'll say is that, again, statewide program is designed for small, really, to work well in rural areas. We wouldn't want to, through a government program, increase rents any more than we have to. And if we start saying you can do 4 or 5% a year in those final 3 years, we might be perverting a market. That, and so I think that this is comfortable. When we've talked to developers, they've all been very okay with this, and we kind of thought they might not be. But
Right,
we haven't heard a peep about this being a problem, which
right,
is why I welcome it being put in the statute. It was always our plan to operate the program with this
right.
protection. But right now, this has not been an issue for
Okay,
Right.
the folks we've talked with.
okay.
Good, it's a good discussion. I'm glad we talked about that. Any other, so we have a $20 million, which the governor did put in his budget.
For missing middle? I'll move for revolving loan.
For revolving fund.
I don't see it on our,
Item 39.
oh, rental, right. Rental housing loan. Good. So we're okay with all that? We're ready to
We're on to VHIP. Commissioner,
Yes, I have a comment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
oh, on VHIP, okay.
Are we there?
Yeah, we're
Sorry.
there,
Trying to be quick. Thank you for putting in suggested language changes. I think that'll help. It's matching what they're doing on the House side. The
Mhm.
one piece that was added, which I need to understand the intent where it came from, is adding a administrative cost not to exceed 6%. This is the only program on this list that there's been a called out administrative cap. And I need to understand where that comes from, because currently that's not the cap.
Yeah,
All these programs are audited and it's only expenses that are eligible. But as I would read this, this would be both 6% for the department operated and all the 5 homeownership centers. And remember, these projects have a 10-year compliance. That will effectively kill the program.
I don't know why this is in here. I think I asked for some language that
Okay.
supposedly existed in another bill that
Okay.
captured your technical needs, and I think that came with it, unless David has something else to offer on that front. Maura.
I'll note that one of our programs also has the 6%
Okay.
cap, which currently our missing middle homeownership program is a 10% cap. That's what you all put into place last year. And the same thing with Josh, because we don't get direct appropriation, and we have to go through the state, we actually, our grant agreements govern our admin costs, but I'll just point that out. It's reminding me, David, that we never really answered your question. I believe the 2 programs you just covered, I'm sorry, homeownership and rental revolving loan fund, act as if the HFA is receiving an appropriation. That's not our typical, that'd be new for us. We usually work through DHCD and get grant agreements through them, and they're double checking all their admin costs for.
Okay, so if you'd prefer that it go back through DHCD.
I mean,
I'm throwing this at you.
we've been told, the past legislation has required it to go through us. We don't need it to, but, because it adds a step in
I
grant
know,
agreements and
yeah, I
lawyers,
know.
and, but, I think this will be worked out in
Approach,
appropriations.
yeah.
We trust VHFA,
Yeah.
they work directly, but I think
It's
they
good for
want to
us to
go.
know when we go into
Right.
approach.
Right.
I personally think a lot of things have just been taking longer because they
Right.
have one more step to go through.
And all of our departments are, we've got a 300% budget increase of moved out grants.
Right.
We didn't get 3 times as many attorneys or contracts
Right.
or grant administrators, and
Yeah.
so anytime you're limiting what we can use for our admin, you're sort of extinguishing our chance to act quickly.
So I'm comfortable striking item 3. David, do you have any reason that you felt it should be in there somehow?
I got an email that said allow for reasonable administrative costs to be covered, thereby maintaining the fiscal health of our program partners.
So that was our language. It's just reasonable.
It just turned it. Okay.
We have audit, they have audits every year, these organizations that cover this program, because they receive enough
Well,
federal.
they're all
funds, they
nonprofits,
trigger-
so they're all
they're all
audited.
So do you need language in there that says a reason? Do you need language in there at all to do that, or?
I don't think so, but if you
Okay.
say we have to operate within 6%, then that's the challenge. We in our language, we had suggested what David just read to you, allow for a reasonable administrative.
Then let's do that.
Yeah.
And we can,
The department shall allow for reasonable administrative. David, do you feel like that's even necessary at that point, or?
I don't think it matters.
Okay,
So instead of partner organizations use not more than 6%.
we'd either
say
strike
something
it
else.
out because I don't think they're gonna be unreasonable. Like, these are all of our partner.
they're all
organizations.
nonprofits, they're all audited, they're all
Yeah.
watched over, they all have federal money. I mean, they're
And may I
all
ask
lots
for
of.
the same from VHBase, because it's similar.
Where is that? Where, in the revolving loan fund?
It is. Sorry, I won't.
Can I just interject in the middle of this?
Mhm.
I think it's important that we track all of the administrative costs. So
Oh,
that
yeah.
if we ask,
Mm-hmm.
you can just pop up
We
and.
can't pay an invoice without there being justified costs.
Right, well,
And they have to break out what's program direct grants versus administrative expenses.
but also if you track it so
Yeah.
that we can review it, or
Oh,
someone
yeah.
can review
We
it
have to
without
track
going through lots of
They have to track it.
research.
They get audited.
Are you finding where else this exists, Maura? That you-
Yes, and it's, page 41.
Page 41.
Now,
46.
I'm doing too much good work in this bill.
Yay.
I didn't notice it.
Oh, it's right here on line 10. Peter's got it on page
Yeah,
46,
it is.
line 10.
Thank you, Peter.
Page
10
46.
and 11 lines.
Yes, no.
Oh, yeah. I think we strike those sections. I have no, appropriations can decide if they're worried that all of a sudden there'll be administrative bloat, but that has not been something that we were worried about.
Did we have it in last year? I don't think we did. Did we?
This is,
Um,
that's a new
Substituting general fund for what would have been fee-based.
Oh, I see. That's fair. So we're taking those two out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, too, you're gonna have to reword that or something, because that's not really cost of administration. So, well, I guess it's just saying you return the excess.
I think that section, you moved something out of section as well. This is where it spoke to how the caps can inflation adjust every year, and now that's moved up by where the cap language is
Okay.
a few pages earlier, so that's why it's, reading differently.
I'm not sure what the suggestion
No,
is.
I'm just saying
Okay.
that subparagraph 2 doesn't make sense under D anymore to me, but.
David, does that comment make sense to you?
Are you talking about D2 on page 46?
Yes.
That's the revolving loan language. So that is what
Right.
tells them to filter all the repayments back through the revolving.
Yeah, I
loan.
have no-
So maybe it'll just be its own section. No, well, it's just,
Oh,
it just
Yeah.
stylistically, it
Oh,
doesn't
okay.
work anymore, is all I was saying.
Okay, David will go with that.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're back in VHIP. We're striking anything about banding administrative costs.
And hoping we will get it in a report as we look at it, as we go,
Right.
get a
We
notion
gotta
of what
do
it's.
something about VHIP, because that's also the higher education investment program.
It is, yeah.
And I get lots of mail from VHIP.
It's got an E in it.
Yeah.
I know, the
And-
letters
and
are
if you
different,
bring it,
but
change the name.
they
There you
changed
go.
their name.
Okay.
Or maybe I should
Great.
open that last letter.
So the rest of VHIP has some, the commissioner now has seen the language changes in VHIP that reflect the policy goals of the program around refugee resettlement, rehousing. People, anything else, Commissioner, you want to say about we're gonna get to the ADU piece next, but I want to talk about the overall intent of who's housed under VHIP.
Nope, those are aligned with our intent of the program.
Okay. And I want to make sure we talk about the appropriation before we get.
So
to Senator
before we get
Clarkson's
to the
consent.
appropriation,
Well, I have
Yeah,
right
yeah.
after the appropriation.
no, on page
Is this not about
52.
ADUs?
No, it's on page 52.
Okay.
Why is section G struck? This is what we require, because we're trying to create more long-term rentals. Because we're asking for a percent of the VHIP program to be spent on ADUs. I don't understand why this section G has been struck.
It's fixed somewhere else.
Yeah, it's in.
just
Was it
corrected.
fixed in that earlier section on page, on
It's on page 48.
page? Okay, so. Okay. But it doesn't explicitly say ADU.
David?
So G is struck because E and F already they're adjusted. The way that E and F are adjusted by striking the language that's stricken and then just saying whether it's a grant or it's a loan through the program, there are universal requirements that apply based on the type of the investment that you have. So all of this, basically, this says now that all of the requirements for grants apply across the board, regardless of what kind of unit it is.
Right.
All the requirements that are for a loan apply regardless of what kind of unit it is.
But they're very different units and we.
Yeah, what we haven't
Why
talked
would-
about that on subsection D, I mean, that's this is a significant expansion of the program.
Right.
And it's not just ADUs. I mean, I don't think you even need to say ADUs.
I know.
Honestly.
Yeah. I mean, I think the question is why, of all the types of housing units that can be created in this program, we would specifically hold out ADUs. That was when we had a very different housing policy.
No,
And we're making a lot of changes that allow for duplexes and bringing units back up to code. And I think the big question here that you can answer, but then the committee needs to make a decision about is, do we want to, for some reason, separate out ADUs?
yes, they're very different. They are, I mean, as we had envisioned them since 1992, they, and as we looked at them last year, and you know, I
I
know
think
it's all-
we're done with looking backwards.
I'm
and we're
never
just
done
saying
with looking backwards when
going
we did
forward.
good work. We did good work on
Going
this.
forward, what makes this different than another unit of housing?
Because we had required that ADUs be rented on a long-term basis, not as short-term rentals.
These,
And-
all
and-
the units require that.
And we did not have a requirement of people having, this is more for middle income, lower middle income people. This was one of our sort of another piece of the missing middle, as it were, and did not require that people be exiting homelessness. I think with the VHIP, we have the requirement that they be exiting.
There's two
That's
couple
one
things going
option.
on here.
That's-
Yeah, on page 48, it still does mention newly created accessory dwelling unit, defines that. And under an ADU, they do not have to take someone exiting homelessness.
So that's
still-
the loan, that's the grant option versus the loan option.
It's just defining the beneficiary.
Okay, that's fine.
That, it just is reworded differently,
Mhm.
but it still doesn't require an ADU to take someone that is exiting homelessness.
Mhm.
No,
I don't think so.
Down,
it turns the requirement, at least the way this is written. I'm
Yeah.
not saying the way it should be.
Sure, no,
Or the way that it's being implemented right
Yeah.
now, what I'm saying is the way this is written, it says that if you use a grant then you have all the same requirements,
Yes.
which means you have to work with resettlement.
Which I think that
Or
makes
homelessness.
perfect sense. It's a grant. That is
Forgivable
state money.
loan
Yeah,
Goes to an ADU, and
right.
you just have to rent it at fair market rent, and it goes away after 10 years.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a separate application for that now,
Right.
each of the homeownership centers,
Right.
to separate the program, so it's
Right.
confusing and easier to understand.
That's all
Yeah.
right. And so what you need to understand
Mhm.
is that it turns on the type of vehicle that you're using,
Right.
grant loan, not on the type of housing. And my point in saying that I don't think you need to specify ADU anymore, and I don't care if you do or not, but this now authorizes the creation of a new unit.
Right.
And an ADU is a new unit.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
So it's superfluous at this point to call ADUs out separately because we're allowing the creation of any kind of new unit
Mhm.
within an existing structure or even of a new structure.
Right.
And that's why I say it's a significant expansion of the types of properties that this program
Mhm.
will fund.
Yeah.
Does everybody understand those?
I don't know why it means it will be an expansion. Because I don't
Because right now
understand.
you can't, the only new unit you can create in the program as the current law currently reads is an ADU.
Right.
This says, if you look at the language on page 48, there are a whole host of new units that can now be created through
So
VHIP.
VHIP, okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. A VHIP is Vermont Housing, it was originally Vermont Rental Housing Improvement Program.
That's what it's called in the statute right now.
Right, and it was an incentive to improve existing properties and existing units, not to create new ones. So the ADU, the distinction was ADUs were designed to create new units. I don't understand if it's an improvement program, why we're creating new units under VHIP.
That is not a question for me.
Okay, so that's new. I just want to flag that for everybody. That's a new aspect of this.
Happy to address it.
Yeah.
And talk about the various issues we've heard of defining it so narrowly.
Mhm.
Either you can fix an existing apartment that's vacant or add an ADU. There's many properties that, as a large, big Victorian home that was a single family home, to create new units in there that aren't ADUs. Someone doesn't live there. It's a
Right.
single rented home. We couldn't turn that into 3 2-bedroom apartments. That it still requires units to be created on a newly created residential structure. There's a single unit or newly created unit within a newly created structure containing, we've limited it to 5 or fewer units. So we're not trying to support 30-unit properties here. There's lots of missed opportunities with this program by having the definition so narrow, creating a garage into an apartment.
So
Correct
me if I'm wrong, Josh, but I thought that it was vacant, blighted, needing weatherization or not up to code. That was my understanding of VHIP eligibility. If it needed significant weatherization that the person couldn't have afforded before, or it was not up to code. And that all those were criteria for eligibility to VHIP.
There's a lot going on here because the very first money we put out for VHIP had no statute. It was CRF money.
Right.
We helped ensure people that were lived in unsafe, non-code compliant buildings didn't get kicked out and become homeless. We used VHIP for that before it was codified that we couldn't do that. We created new units the first year. Once the bill was finally codified last year, it took away being able to help fix occupied, non-code compliant properties so that the tenant was forced to either live in unsafe conditions or have the landlord evict them, fix it up, and then jack up the rent. So that is added here, as well as this scenario where there's plenty of opportunity to create new units here or there on structures that go beyond simply you have to be vacant for 90 days before you can use VHIP money. And that has been a request of the homeownership centers, the homeless advocates, everyone saying we're leaving units off the table that we could bring online for $30,000 to help people now, help people that could be evicted because they live in unsafe housing. And if the landlord was left without a resource, their choice would be go borrow the money and jack up the rents, and that person would never have that opportunity. So these are all slight adds to the program to provide more housing under the same $50,000 cap, which is staggered between a 3-bedroom or more at 50. You're creating 2-bedroom or less, the cap's at 30,000, it's still got the 20%
So
match, so.
Okay, I get
Yeah.
that. So, but help me understand. My understanding was this, the objective was low hanging fruit. We had these 2 programs on low hanging fruit, ADUs and VF. That why, I understand being able to create new units within, but the structure, when you're talking, I mean, line 16D enables whole new construction for not only, I mean, I can see creating new units within an old house. But this is just a construction. I mean,
I
this
mean, I'll
is
give
just
you an
been
example.
incenting new, totally
I just
new
want to flag we have
construction.
5 more minutes for this conversation. I want to leave 15 for Randy's audit request, and then we have to make sure drafting can happen and have our final.
I mean, this is obviously a policy decision. Example one on this came from Down Street, right in Barry, where they had a home that there was a double lot, and they wanted to turn the home into 2 apartments and then build a 2-unit structure next to it. And serve people exiting homelessness and so, and there's just missed opportunities left and right. And
This sounds like flexibility.
flexible, you know, yes, the program to get an okay to start was limited to vacant structures only. But as we've evolved and fixed up a lot of vacant structures, more opportunities have arisen and more people could be housed at still this reasonable rate if it had these additions added to it, as well as make sure we're not displacing folks that are living in unsafe housing without a solution for it.
So do we nowhere have the language that launched this program, which was vacant, blighted, non-weatherized, non-code compliant? Do we not have those as top values first? I mean,
This still is a competitive program. The homeownership centers.
I get that, but
You
do
know,
we
and
have,
if you're building a new structure, I highly doubt that a $30,000 grant is going to be what makes it happen.
Yeah.
The low hanging fruit is still what gets done 95% of the time. Even ADUs at only giving $50,000 is really not covering the majority of the cost. So
Senator Clarkson, this
Yeah.
3 minutes includes if you want to set aside money specifically for ADUs.
I'm
You
also
have
just
3
trying to
minutes
see,
to
I mean,
make
we
that
also
case.
have not discussed this. And that's a big program shift is all I'm trying to say. Thank you.
I just want to, I have to move us along if people have to go in here.
That is a really big change, and my concern, what I love about this program is its affordability and that it improves buildings that are already there, improves the community, raises value of properties all around it. It does concern me that if a newly constructed structure is eligible, that could really suck up all the funding or a majority of the funding. And if your example is a typical example, I would just suggest that we do something like a newly created unit combined with a renovation. Because I think
Okay, that gets you.
30,000 a unit
Yeah.
could be a big incentive for a developer to create just new units.
Okay.
New
so
buildings
You don't
everywhere.
want somebody to build a new building, but you understand that if I'm gonna put 3 apartments there, but I got this big backyard and I could put a new carriage house, because there's no old carriage house there in the back, that would work.
I'm not saying I don't want them to do it. I'm saying what's great about this program is that public money gets an incredible bang for its
Right.
buck. That's what I like about this program.
That's what we are talking
Personally.
about.
and I don't see that changing. I mean, I'm just trying to provide more affordable units to people at an average
Yeah,
cost of $30,000 a unit. That's not gonna change.
Yeah,
The
we're not
cap's
gonna
still there.
build new construction at 30,000.
Just some more flexibility
Maura?
has been requested.
I just want to amplify what Senator Cummings just said, which is, from our opinion, if you can build new for $30,000.
Right.
That
More
would
power
be.
to you.
God bless. Yeah.
Please, so I have no worries about this language because 20 years ago, you couldn't have done that, and so you're definitely not doing it now.
Yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
not suggesting that they build it for 30, it's that could be part of their stack. Is my concern.
In the competitive process and knowing that this is going through the state's homeownership centers, nonprofits and all, and still feeling comfortable that there's gonna be enough competition for this money so far that.
Right, and this is going to the smallest of the small. I need money to create 1 more unit, 2 more units, not a developer who's penciling out huge projects. and
It's
getting
got
huge
the 5-unit cap. We
Right.
put that on ourselves because we didn't want the money to go to fill in a stack of a 30-unit
Mhm.
property. This is still small scale
this is infill, I have a
understand.
Quonset hut on this property and I need to. turn
Totally
it into-
understand.
I know
It's
where
just,
there's
again,
an old dry
renovation
cleaning
is more,
establishment in the backyard, if somebody'd like to be.
it's just renovation is more difficult. And
Mhm.
the great thing about this program is it incentivizes renovation. And
If
There's not
I-
much else that.
If I
does.
had time, I would tell you about the new housing that's down street on Elm Street and what it was like in there. Rube Goldberg got his drawings from the heating system in this place.
That's,
I mean, it was scary, and HUD kept saying they should be evicted. Why don't you evict them in Vermont? And we
Right.
said, because it's really cold when you're on the street, and this is better than the
A
sidewalk.
lot of this money is going to replace heating, electrical, and plumbing systems to keep people safely housed
Yeah.
because they're living in buildings that are.
So we're,
This
and that's why I
had-
don't want to
this
get
had-
diverted, but I've
This
said,
had piping
Yeah.
strewn through the halls with gas going through it.
so this is a section we can move right now. If I hear two people who want a change,
I'm fine with the change.
Which,
which,
I don't know.
yeah,
I'm
what- yeah,
fine with
what
what's
would
in there.
make me
Can you
comfortable
propose
would
something?
just
Yeah.
be in subparagraph D on page 16, or I'm sorry, line 16 on page 48.
Mhm.
A newly created unit within a newly created structure that contains 5 or fewer residential units as combined with a unit undergoing renovation.
Right, I think what that one's getting at is if someone is creating a 5-unit structure or more, we can only use VHIP for a few units. So this could ensure affordability goes to a couple units if someone is using other money to build a market rate unit. It's not, so.
It's the most flexible money for the smallest
Yeah.
projects is the question on the table.
Right.
And combined with another renovation, it
It does,
would narrow it.
it does narrow it.
These are the people
But that's what I
doing
was-
the work. I'm sitting here in a desk in a building.
Yeah,
When the people that are doing the work says, this is what we need.
just let us do it.
Just
Yeah,
let
I
us
mean,
do it. Let them do
What I'm
it.
struggling with is we're allocating what, $50-60 million in this bill for new housing. And part of this 20 capped at $30,000 a unit, you don't want to see new housing built with. It's gonna have a 10-year affordability.
That's.
It's not that I don't want to see new housing built with it.
It goes to
I
refugees
don't want the
and-
rest of the program to suffer.
I think the parameters and the cost are not gonna be the new units aren't gonna be the driver for this program ever with those cost limits. It might make a property or two work once in a while, and we've missed some opportunities to do that in a small setting.
Right, it's just generally my understanding is renovation is more expensive than building. When you're building an old house, but I've said it, you understand my concern,
yeah,
Mhm.
our concern is so.
so.
I'd be happy to, like, if
Get
you
my
said,
back
well, we are have to do a
bedroom
report,
redone.
report back to you next
Mhm,
year.
Yeah,
How many we spent on new
Mhm.
units compared to, and I'm
Perfect,
telling you, it's.
you're gonna
be that
report back
much.
anyway.
that's great,
So
I'm happy
our
with
concern
that,
is
Yeah.
satisfied.
yes.
And happy to revisit this next year if it's going the other direction, because I support the low hanging fruit should be the first thing we do.
Yeah,
And the stuff with multiple benefits.
So we have about 2 minutes to just simply call the question, a set aside for ADUs. You can speak to why you want that, and then we're gonna have to go around and decide, do we want a set aside in this larger program specifically for ADUs?
we've spent a lot of time talking about ADUs. It's one of our low hanging fruit strategies. We have missing middle, we have a VHIP, we have ADUs. And so my question, just as we did last year with the similar river money, is we set aside 20% of the VHIP money, the previous, for ADUs. So that is what I'm asking for, a percent of the appropriation, which is now quite substantial. Is Eric here? Okay, I'll be right at it.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Everything,
Thanks, Jim was just getting
okay.
for ADUs. And my request is to do what we did last year, which was 20%. We now have, Josh can give us a report as to how much money has been spent county to county by county, because our home ownership centers are now at least ours in Wednesdays in my district, has now a long list of people ready to do ADUs. We've done a big article and marketing on ADUs. If we don't put money behind it, I think it's a mistake.
are we putting no money, or are we putting money out there and saying it can go to ADUs
Go to any.
or it can go to anything?
Mhm,
Once we start setting that 20% in stone,
mhm,
that limits the flexibility
right.
to do what might be a better project for more people. ADUs are small. They're not ideal for young families with children. I don't,
So we're gonna go around, Allison. We don't have time for you to respond to everybody. So Senator Harrison, yes or no to set aside for ADUs?
Reluctantly, no, as long as we get a
Mhm.
report.
Senator Brock,
No,
I'm a no. So that section gets struck, David.
The all 20 million gets struck?
No, a set aside for ADUs.
Was there language in here on that? I didn't-
Yeah, it's in 9.1. It's subsection B under the 20 million.
So Josh, would you be kind enough to get us what has been spent currently on ADUs county by county?
Mhm.
I will,
I put
when
an
next
X
quarter
percent.
report comes, I can tell you 24 are under construction right now, but we won't have more data until they come out with their next report.
Senator Brock has been extremely patient about his audit, and we need to give that 10 minutes. So that section is coming out, and we're giving Senator Brock the floor.
I put an audit in every bill.
some work better.
Somebody must have been an auditor.
We've talked about how do we speed up this process? How do we deal with the confusion and duplication and overlap and process delays and fiefdoms and so on in this process? And I thought of addressing this in a number of ways because we haven't talked about it a whole lot. One of the ways is to do what we typically do is form a committee or a task force. And putting in the same room the people who fooled with this for 20 years and haven't fixed it, I didn't think it was really going to be that productive. And so I chose to ask for what's called a performance audit under government auditing standards to be performed by or overseen through a third party by the auditor of accounts. He's still thinking about it. He said he believes it's an interesting and probably useful idea, but needs to develop more thought process on how to actually do it and think about it a bit more. So I said that what I would like to do at this stage is put in, first I had it drafted as an audit for specific ways to do it. And by the way, a performance audit, there are various kinds of audits. A performance audit can be focused on specific tasks, often dealing with things like timeliness, efficiency, reduction in duplicate, those kinds
I
of.
did
which is
Google
exactly-
performance audit, and it said those exact words.
Yeah.
So it was
And that's what a performance audit is. The beauty of an audit and that kind of approach is it typically means the production of a document that can be examined by another auditor using the same work papers who will come with the same conclusion. So it's something that has some structure to it. And above all, it has some independence to it. I thought that a fresh pair of eyes who approached this in a logical way could deal with identifying some of the high points. And I had some additional language to put in that I may still ask to put in, which addresses the current housing crisis that the state faces. And consider and make findings and recommendations concerning structural and procedural inefficiencies in the current system, process improvements to streamline the process and reduce duplicative or unnecessary time and economic costs to the parties involved, and actions to accelerate the development of new residential units and the renovation of existing residential units while maintaining adequate environmental health and safety protections. And I put this set up right now, though, the limit, and I don't know, has the copy been distributed, Scott?
Everyone has it
All right.
now.
Oh, here.
Thank you.
Oh, there's yours. Yeah.
That is really done in two parts, and this really specifies the first part, and that is by January the 15th of next year, the auditor is just going to give us a plan as to how to do this, plan, a budget, and a timetable, and a cost, obviously the budget to do it, and then coming back to the committees of jurisdiction, so that then at that time we can decide whether or not we want to go forward. It's designed to identify, as I mentioned here, measures including potential legislative and policy changes, not just looking at what we have right now, that will improve the timeliness, economy, and efficiency of our residential housing development approval process. That's it in a nutshell.
May I ask why you see this as an audit and just not just a review of all the housing permits,
Well,
laws,
the
et
question
cetera,
of,
that-
of review is review by whom, and using what kinds of standards to make that review. And it's those two things that the audit piece adds. Auditors don't just look backwards over numbers. There's such things as financial audits, which is what we typically think of. There are compliance audits, which we sometimes think of.
right,
And there are performance audits. And performance audits can be many things. They can be looking at the performance of a program and simply saying, is it doing what it's supposed to do according to the rules? Or it could be more expansive, as I'm defining it here, by saying that it's got some specific audit objectives. That's improving timeliness, efficiency, eliminating duplication, and decreasing costs. That's what I think I'm trying to get at. And that's what I think is missing. You know, we have all this paper
Yes.
about process
We want
and who does what and
quantitative.
so on, but
We just keep that.
it's not moving fast. It's not moving fast enough.
So all I'll say is, I think we both talked to the auditor, and I think their preference would be to leave it general, so they could come
That's
back with
correct.
what they can accomplish in a performance audit. And I saw your other more specific language. I think that makes it harder, especially if we do end up getting some changes across the finish line,
Correct.
they'd be prematurely
These are
measuring
the
things.
way you
Yeah.
structured in the piece that I've given you here is very, very broad and not prescriptive.
Right.
And it doesn't really cost a whole lot either, because there's no budget. I don't know the auditor like that. There's no budget.
which
for
may be a
defining.
problem.
There's a
Yeah,
budget to do the work, but not for outlining what it is that needs to be done.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's cool. Even just defining the process would be really helpful, right? Which isn't stated in here, but you would have to define the process to analyze the process. And I do like
Maybe
your
I can-
additional language, but if they prefer this, I'm fine.
And
I think it's a good
and I'm
idea.
fine with
General.
this. I'm
Yeah.
fine with this.
Yeah,
Okay, so I hear enough consensus, David, we're gonna add this piece. I don't know what's in your pocket, but it's so related.
That's a note from the president.
Wait, which president?
yeah.
So I know, so that, we're putting that in. We skipped over the VHCB 25 million. I want us to take a few minutes, I would say this might be where someone gets outnumbered, so, but it's going to change. I'm sure it will, just like so many of these pieces. This is a nod to an attempt in BAA to really give more money to VHCB, which we know goes everywhere in every little nook and cranny that it's needed. We can take a yes or no vote, or I don't know, Senator Brock, if there's something you wanted to say to raise additional concerns about.
Well, I'm concerned, and I know the governor in particular was concerned about this ad. And I said what I said on the floor, that, the ad comes in and it wasn't asked for. It is unclear as to how it's going to be used and whether or not it can in fact be used within the timeframe.
And this is
And-
FY 24, not BAA.
Yeah. No, but I mean, that basically, if you're looking at it as additive to BAA,
Mhm.
it has an impact, because it means that if you're going to do this by adding it, there's something else we're not going to do.
Well, right, and we're looking at it in the totality of the FY 24 budget.
Yeah.
BAA was, are we trying to get this out the door even
Well,
sooner?
yeah, but realistically, since they hadn't spent all the money that they had in the first place at that point in time, which
Yeah.
that's my understanding, that immediately raised the question of, why are we adding it to last year's budget before? And why then, what, and I think I asked also at the time,
Mhm.
what impact is going to have of what we do now?
And so Polly's here from VHCB.
Yeah, so I can certainly, for the record, Polly Ranger with VHCB, speak to this 25 million in next year's budget and whether we'd be able to use it. We certainly have a pipeline of applications that we know are out there that we see coming to us, that we'd be able to put this out the door.
And I think Gus said, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but Gus said something like $100 million or more in the
Certainly.
pipeline.
Yeah.
That-
Yeah, the 100 3 million in kind of applications we know come to us over the next 6 to 9 months. So that's not even all the way through the next fiscal year, that's the first half. I think that's kind of looking at our September board meeting and before, we have 3 board meetings until that. And that would be that 130 million applications. We have 42 million already to put out the door, so that would go towards that. And then this 25 could also go towards that. But in our full pipeline, we have 200, we're kind of aware of $200 million of asks that can develop into applications for 2,000 units. So there's certainly the need we're seeing in the system, and we know there are projects that will be added to that list, just as there are projects that will change.
And what the timeline of the projects that we're talking about from the approval of this budget, actual ready for occupancy of those, can you give me a sense of what that timeline is?
You know, I can't give you the kind of lifetime of the project mainly because I started at the HCD a couple months ago, so I haven't been through the whole lifetime, but we have Chris Donnelly in the room, who's speaks for the housing developers standpoint, and he can talk to the development length of projects.
Chris Donnelly with the Champlain Housing Trust. It takes from the time that we get funding to the time of occupancy. Well, the construction period is usually a year or 13 months. So getting to the permits, assembling the
I just want to, basically, the timeliness is something that we're talking, we have this urgent need, and I really want to understand in all the various things we do, how long is it taking us to do it? From the time we say, here, you got the money. When are we going to get somebody in the door?
Right.
As soon as possible.
Well, what is that timeline? What's your best guess?
It varies per project, but it's anywhere from 12 months to it's probably more like 18 months if everything's going smoothly.
So for the time that we have the money, you got a project completed in 16 months?
18.
That's
12 to
actually
18
not
months.
bad.
12 to 18 months.
That's the permitting, the purchase, the whole.
We have to assemble the financing before we can move forward in the.
Well, that takes time.
Yeah.
And then, but is that within that 18-month period?
Yeah. We're looking at as an example, a development in downtown Burlington right now. People have been talking about for 5 or 6 years. And we're moving forward on that, and that we haven't assembled all the financing for it yet, but we're working on it now. We have some awards in hand. So that's going through both the local. That's going to take a longer period.
Yeah, but I mean, that's projects that you're talking about. They're going through the local zoning and then Act 250 and then breaking ground,
it takes
building, and then occupying, all of that within 18 months?
That's on the short end.
Right, and if we exempt downtowns from Act 250, that would cut probably a year off the project timeline. Maura.
I just want to point out back to the VHCD funding piece, that if anything, if you want to shorten the time frame, affordable housing theoretically being exempt from Act 250 if it's a priority housing project, actually is more likely to move faster than market rate housing. So just another plug that if the goal is to get money on the street, then VHCD funding likely is going to qualify for PHP, and then all this changes that you're doing here.
So I'm going to call it to question now because we need to give time for drafting and voting.
I would move this section and I supported it 25 million.
Okay, so 25 million.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just going to a probes.
Right. Yes, 25 million.
It's our Sears catalog Christmas.
Yes,
And our job is to promote housing and support housing. That's our job.
Yeah.
And the performance audit will measure the timeline.
That's right. Now, when it gets to the probes, I will support funding mental health and agencies.
So it sounds like we're leaving it. Yeah. Thanks for the conversation, though. That was good. That should give David and Ellen what they need. Ellen, you might be done. Of course she is. God, you did that with your eyeballs.
We didn't do too much bad today.
No, not at all. We can take Pat. We can ask questions of the appropriations. I don't think anything changed from our discussion.
So Patrick, in joint fiscal, all the numbers in the column labeled appropriation amount, the first two numbers in the middle, haven't heard you change any numbers. So that should all be the same. What you see in column D there is from the governor's budget recommendation. There was some conversation yesterday about that section 42, if there being money there. That appears to actually be in the budget adjustment, the Senate side. But there's a note accounting for that at the bottom of your table.
Well, I guess, so I was seeing it as separate from the 25 million in CAA.
Yes, so that's a good point. In the column labeled net increase, there are some in there that are increases from what the governor is asking for, and some that are just piled on top of it.
Right.
So if there are any, I think I have that captured correctly, but if there's any in there that, you know, if you see something.
I see what you're saying.
So it's not uniformly.
So we've added $55 million of asks essentially to what the governor has in his budget. Is there anything, Commissioner?
No, just because I'm seeing over, under the governor's budget recommend, I see a note under VHCV for the BAA, but there's no amount in there for the budget that was in the governor's recommend.
That's fair. This is above and beyond.
Above and beyond.
Yeah, this is an additional appropriation.
Okay.
But it's not easy to see that.
It gets confusing, and I just verified with Commissioner Gresham yesterday, and it's, the total is a little over 24 million.
Okay.
Just.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. So everything reflected here is one time.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
This
refer
is
to ongoing.
Pat like helping us rough. This was like a rough.
This is, this is
Yeah.
all general fund here.
Right.
Except
not
potentially
big.
for the eviction fund. You flagged that as, you had flagged that as a possible.
I don't think that means it's being paid for with one-time money, is it?
That's what I heard.
It's eviction rescue.
One-time money versus base? Is that what you were
The
talking about?
intent, the intent of all of these, except for the mobile home park money, is one time.
Okay.
Some of it could still be ARPA, like I thought the eviction rescue fund was very applicable for the final ARPA.
I would have to do a little
Okay.
asking around to see how much ARPA is actually available.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot less than they're used to.
I wouldn't be too optimistic. but
After
certainly
BAA.
ask.
Yeah.
So
I'm still a little bit confused regarding the governor's recommended budget for VHCB. And I know the note refers to to what's in the Budget Adjustment Act. Is there anything in the governor's budget specifically for VHCB over?
Yes.
Haven't addressed, that was the 24 million. Right?
That's the 24 million, some very specific for housing.
10 million of one time for housing and 14 million regular VHCD.
right,
Right.
but in current budget, that's drawing up FY 23. This is what we're talking about here,
No,
is
that's-
FY
That's
24.
the, no, that's the
No,
governor's
budget.
FY 24 budget recommendation.
It was
I
24
thought it
million.
was 15.
That, there's numbers out there that I've seen, it's only 10 that aren't correct. It's
Okay.
24 million.
It's 15 plus
Two
10.
different sources of it, 24.
14 and a half plus 10
Okay.
For FY 24.
for FY 20.
For this year's
Mhm.
And the
Some of the
14.5
intent is the capital
was
budget.
what again, Josh?
3.5, a little over 3.5 is capital budget.
Yeah.
11 is property transfer and 10 is general.
Mhm. Yeah.
So what we're talking about is 25 million above that. So given that there are 200 million in need at the moment, and we again have a housing crisis, we need, and this is the kind of housing we want to be incenting. I fully support at the moment 25 million
Right.
above the governor's ask.
Yeah.
It's our wish list.
It's
Yes,
our wish list.
Thank you. And I just want to be clear, this
Father
spreadsheet
Christmas.
is what JPO
I
helped
like
us put
Christmas
together for
trees.
our own thinking. They would clean this up because appropriations would want to look at, but what, they know what they've put in the FY
They
24.
live in the real world.
Yeah. This is for us, like, to look at what we're asking very roughly.
This
Thank
is
you
not how I
for
would
the
present
24 hours.
appropriations.
Okay,
So just a question on the base versus not base for
Mhm.
VHCV, because we've received a lot of
Yes.
comments from folks saying that they believe it should be funded at the
The full-
mandated amount.
Or 27.8 would be the full amount.
Right, so maybe this committee should consider recommending that we fund that at that this 25 million that we have in here be base funding.
I don't know that anyone knows when they ever got there.
I would just say
Required.
appropriations is very well aware of what VHCB should be getting every year. And they would anticipate hearing from us, yes, please give them all of that money.
And
We're trying to make a specific case for housing this year, but they're very well aware that we never totally fund
so
VHCB. And Senator Kitchell has the priority of doing that. So she's often raised it above what the governor's asked for to get closer to the full amount. But I don't know. if others-
I don't know that we've ever fully funded.
Right.
It was one of those things that probably this committee set as what we should do.
Yeah.
And then it comes up against the reality of what we can do. And do we do, or do we take a couple million and fund services for the people that are in those
Mhm.
housing units?
And remember what their money in base funding also has to go to conservation. So it isn't all housing.
Right.
So our 25 billion is specifically for
That's a
housing.
really good point. We fought a
Okay.
lot in the legislature
Okay, right.
about changing the amount of money. I
Oh.
mean, I still say a little prayer to Governor Keenan every time we have this debate, because I think it was really beautiful what she did. And what Gus did and many people did many years ago, which is say they're both important to Vermonters.
Yes, agree.
And people deserve open space and beauty, even if they live in affordable housing. So we should keep combining these.
Okay,
These
thank you.
New timing question.
Yes,
You're planning on voting on this?
yes. We can get the voting sheet ready, and I think David's making his final changes.
Okay, yeah, because I need to go to joint fiscal just to find out what's going on.
Yes. Are you chairing it? Because you might.
I am not chairing it.
Okay. So we'll try
I
to get,
did that last time.
right, that's why I wanted to get us moving
That we- no, we
before
just-
the clock
This is
ran out.
informal money
Yeah.
chair. This is money chairs.
Okay,
I did chair joint fiscal formative meeting, but the
okay.
money
this is-
chair,
This is just money.
but the money chairs haven't met in several weeks
Yeah.
because we did the formative meeting.
Yeah.
at-
So
so
we're,
anyway.
we're in a holding pattern waiting for the final bill,
David just sent a copy.
and David just sent a copy, so we can
Okay.
print it out.
We got 7 minutes.
We're moving, so we'll print a copy out. We should look through it one more time. I don't think anybody pulled anything, but we just want to make sure we see what we asked for.
And Scott, also, could I have an extra copy?
Hope he's getting it somehow, but
Well, they can look at our website, it will be there.
I'm gonna run down the hall.
yes.
Yeah, we're waiting for print copy.
Uh-huh.
And then I'll
Yeah,
come
we got
back.
no breaks, so I completely understand. Taking the file. Oh, wait.
David,
Great. We're doing, we have the copy, we're printing it. Do you want to sit in here
I mean, if you want.
or? I do need them.
We need your Zen
Yes.
presence.
Let's make sure we see our,
You have a Zen presence.
Well, but it's nice that
you can sit in, no one is occupying the witness chair.
Are you
We're
going to hear
for-
from Ellen as well? or-
I think we'll hear from both of you, but unless, I don't know which order, it doesn't.
Her stuff's all first, so I didn't wanna, you know what I mean?
But-
I don't kick in until like, what, page like 47, so.
Sure.
But you get the authorship credit.
I know, right?
That's because
It's under your name on the website, so.
And he also has the money pieces. He has the money, so.
I am spending a lot more money.
I don't think we want to get into whose sections are more important, but these are pretty monumental.
But after Senator Brock told it, we might see that the planning and zoning impacts.
The time is money.
Housing investment. is-
Yeah.
Means a lot to the city.
Yeah.
Huge. It's actually very exciting. Not without its challenges, but very exciting.
gonna be version 10.1.
That sounds nice.
So what is the theory on
Alright,
that?
so I'm
Why
just
isn't
getting
it
my little
9.2
stuff
or
right.
9.3?
The first, the number before the period is the public draft. The number after the period are internal drafts. So this draft, this document has been published 10 different times.
Okay. So we don't know how fast the printers can get us the copies, so we should probably pull it up on the screen to look for our final changes and. I think it's mostly this, huge section change. Do you think section changes, page number changes that occurred in grade?
I did eliminate the reserved sections and renumbered.
Okay,
From
so
my
that,
stuff down,
yeah.
will be the difference.
The printer should.
To two sections.
Okay.
I have the first change on page 20. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think
what do you
we'll wanna like
Nine?
slowly
Or-
scan our eyes, like we'll quickly scan our eyes through
Okay.
section just to, but yes. Ellen, so we have the new draft, but not printed yet, so we're gonna look at it on the screen while we wait for the printer.
Oh, yeah, and then highlight it.
Ellen, I
Oh, you-
removed all the highlighting.
Clean copy.
Clean copy, amazing, thank you both, great team.
But I can tell you verbally what I did as we quickly go
Okay,
through.
so we have the bill up and we can scroll.
We lost a page, down to 53 pages.
That's great. 50 pages is not bad for such a huge bill. Good.
So the first change I made was on page 20, in the Active 50 sections that we were just discussing.
Does anyone want to read the, I asked this with trepidation, but it is the final look. Before page 20,
Yeah.
does anybody really want to relook at?
I didn't see anything.
Okay. Great. Sorry. I'm glad we're at that point, ready to let it go. It's gonna go drive.
It
by
has a
itself.
long, exactly, it has a long path
Yeah.
before this is
Yeah.
made law.
Where are we, page 20?
Page 20,
Act 250,
which we
section
can
16,
roughly look at our existing copy, but.
where we got rid of maintenance.
Yes, in section 16 on page 20, the word maintenance has been struck on line 18 of draft 10.1. So,
Great. I really value that change. Thank you, Senator Brock. It sounds like they were using it.
So the other thing that I did in this draft, in page 23, so the enhanced designation starts at the bottom of page 23, but the changes are on page 24 and thereafter. I changed designated downtown to designated area. And so now any designated area can be an enhanced designated area. In addition, just for clarity, based on what the NRB said, I added the phrase natural resources board throughout this section so that it's clear that that is the board being discussed. And finally, I updated the effective date section so that the enhanced designation doesn't start until January 1, 2024, after the bylaws and rules for this program have been adopted.
Great.
I'm sorry, I was trying to find it. Did you want to say department is the
Yes. So the department is,
housing, community development department?
THCD.
that's already defined in the chapter.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then, I'm sorry, can I see page 24 up there? Or whatever page it is now, the
Where
enhanced
section 19
designation?
begins.
The draft is
For
posted on
any
the website.
designated area. Right, I know, I was trying to get to it, but
Yep.
I was doing two things at once.
Yeah, always good to look. And from here on, drafters will catch anything.
A designated area doesn't need to be capitalized, that's not a thing.
Nope.
We capitalize very little in statute.
Yeah, which is fine, I just,
Yeah.
sometimes it means
No, I'm
it's
just-
defined or something.
Those are your changes.
Yes.
Beautifully done, Ellen. Thank you so much. go rest, because you've just finished S5. And this, before it gets down to resources.
I was gonna say, can I move approval? That opens it up for discussion.
Do we, of this section, or do you want to see any of David's changes before?
Oh.
He doesn't
I
do the
thought
whole
this
thing.
was everything.
David, do you have any changes?
Well, so my
Yeah.
first two changes are removing things, so you won't see them. It's cost of administration in both that VHFA and the VHIP program.
Mhm.
I also removed the placeholder for the AD percentage set aside in the appropriation section. So the addition is to put Senator Brock's language into the body of the bill.
Do you want to
at
see
the
that?
end. And that's the draft 4.1 version of his proposal that was handed around the room. So that should
Okay.
be, I don't know, section 44 or 5. It's
Then I will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve. This is 10.1, draft 10.1 of what is the official title? Housing,
The home bill,
the home bill.
an
Okay.
act related to housing opportunities made for everyone.
Oh, housing, all right,
She's got an acronym that means something.
okay.
I hear a motion. Do we have a second?
Yes.
Senator Clarkson, second. We're probably printing up the.
Oh, I have it.
Oh, I was like, we have a clerk.
Do we do motion and second on this? I don't
Yeah.
see it.
It doesn't
just in-
need,
it's just for
it's
the
not
record.
needed on that. Just the vote.
And then you call everyone's name in whatever order you.
Okay, and this is vote for the bill as recommended. Senator Brock,
Yes.
Senator Clarkson,
Yes.
Senator Cummings.
Yes,
Senator Harrison, yes. Senator Ron Hins.
Yes.
Okay. The
okay.
results of your vote are 5-0.
Thank you. So, well, Ellen, I do want to thank you. So David already ran out the door, but I want to take a moment as people are packing up to thank Ellen and David, particularly Damien, of course, even Becky, before his sections got taken out. I really, really want to thank Scott as well.
Organized it all.
This was, thank you all for indulging me in my first major bill as a chair. Thank you, JFO. Thank you, everyone who's been a part of this process. Thank you, committee members. This is
Thank you, Warren, Josh, too.
monumental work. Yeah,
All the people that have
yeah. You've been members of
Kept us
the
on the
committee
straight and narrow.
formally. I'm ready to fight for this bill. And we have heard so much. We've heard from over 100 Vermonters about housing, and we have done great work to try and move the needle on reaching our housing goals and meeting our needs. And here we go, onward through the building. Wonderful. Thank you.
It's exciting. Thank you.
On time.
Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Someone will help me fill out this form.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that you're.
I was clerk once upon a time.
Yeah, bring your own.
We don't have a bill now. So I can't.
What I'm gonna do.
For the ones you had today.
The big push. Yeah.
6 minutes.
I know.
Let's open the cookie.
Yay.
This calls for a cookie.
I don't even know how it feels. Okay, so it's not. Yes, I was gonna say something like we'll dole out checks, but we'll get to that. I don't know how it feels. It's like maybe you need some reason, I guess. Oh,
You just need hunger.
With everything now.
Right.
I mean, this will be ready to look at, so everything.
Here.
Ready to be done anyway.
Yay. Oh, I like this. Right.
Ceremonial housing bill cookie, no?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Josh? You want a ceremonial housing bill cookie?
Part of the discussion.
We can go offline.